Hey folks, welcome back for another video. Today I am giving you a tour of my pantry slash apothecary space. So I'm going to share with you some of our pantry essentials, what we like to keep in supply and why, what we're growing and preserving, and kind of our approach to being more self-sufficient. I hope that you'll find this video helpful and maybe informative to your own practices. All right, let's not waste any more time. Let's get started looking at the pantry and apothecary. So a little history about this room. I still find myself calling it the red room, and the reason being is that this space used to be a very dark red color. It was primarily used for miscellaneous storage. So we had just so much junk in here that there was no access to the floor space. It pretty much went all the way out to where our hallway is. And we had anything from exercise equipment, Christmas decorations, tools, office supplies. The space just had a lot of junk that we didn't really need. So when the pandemic happened and we suddenly had all of this time that we were spending at home, we started going through this space thoroughly, trying to get rid of any excess junk and trying to just start the process of decluttering our lives a bit so that we could stay more organized and focused on our ultimate goal, transitioning into a more simple and sustainable lifestyle. So this space still is a little bit of a multi-use room. My husband and I are artists, so we do like to paint occasionally and do other crafts. So I have some of our art supplies here. We do also have on this bottom shelf here Christmas decorations, fishing tackle box, Halloween decorations. We love Halloween here. And then on this second shelf here, we're keeping some of our extra pantry items. We've been trying to stock up on things that we use on a regular basis. So we're not eating as many tomatoes anymore, but I do like to keep them around for my husband's lunches at work. I'm also keeping stock of proteins and quick and easy meals. So we have some powdered peanut butter here, some regular peanut butter. I like powdered peanut butter because it preserves a bit longer than your regular peanut butter. And then along with our proteins, we do have some organic black beans, lots of tuna fish. I love making tuna cakes. And then some mixed chicken and vegetable stews. I like to keep those in hand just for those days where maybe we're both really sick and don't want to cook. This is an easy way for us to make sure that we're still eating even if neither of us are willing to do the work to prep and make a meal, and we either don't want to afford to go out to a restaurant or just are not feeling well enough to actually be able to sit down and eat at a restaurant. Other items here, I have some collard greens, corn, peas, and just some of your basic baking goods. We don't bake on a regular basis. We're not a household that eats a lot of pastas or breads, but I like to keep it on stock for the holidays when my husband likes to make cakes and pies and different things. It's just a fun activity, and it's useful to have those things on hand so we don't have to run to the store just for baking goods. And then last on this shelf here, we've got beans and rice, bulk beans and bulk rice. These are our 5-gallon food safe preservation containers. I filled those up. They are sealed and they include some oxygen absorbers within those. So these will last, if I don't open them, anywhere from 10 to 20 years. So I just like to have those on stock just in case something crazy happens. The world is so crazy now, and with all of the changes to the climate and how that affects crops, I think it's good to just have a backup plan in case there are just hard years. Grab my stool here. All right. So then up here is where I have my miscellaneous glass bottles. A lot of these will be filled by the end of the growing season with herbal remedies. And of course I have some mason jars both on this top shelf and on this middle shelf here. These will all be filled with canned goods, but while they're not in use, this is our staging area. And you can see here I have some jars, mason jars with springs in them. These I use for making sauerkraut. If you're interested in learning how to make sauerkraut in mason jars, feel free to watch my video on that topic right up here. Also on this top shelf, just some vinegars for cleaning and canning. We have some apple cider vinegar and some white vinegar. In this corner here, more mason jars. And in the very, very back, I do have a supply of drinking water. We do occasionally lose power here. It's not very often, but it was absolutely terrible during the pandemic. For one entire week in the spring, we had no power, and it was very early spring, and it was just miserable here. And I wish that we had stocked up on water for flushing our toilet, for washing up. We ended up doing the classic stand by your wood stove and do a sponge bath during that time. Not my favorite thing, but not terrible. At least we had the wood stove that we could heat the water up on and be moderately comfortable for that whole process. But since then, I've been very big on making sure that we have non-potable water for just miscellaneous uses, because trust me, if you start really looking at how much water you use every day, especially if you are a homesteader and you're doing things like washing produce and washing dishes, because you end up using a lot of dishes and equipment, you use an incredible amount of water, hundreds and hundreds of gallons, if not thousands every week. Some of the containers that have water in them right now are actually containers we use for maple syruping. So this is kind of their use during the off season. Also below here, we have the buckets that we use to collect maple syrup in. It's just 3 buckets. We're not running any large operations, just enough for ourselves. And then we also have some canning equipment down here, some water filters. I think like a lot of folks right now, as we learn more about PFAS, it's probably inevitable that it's in our well water, since we live in an area with a lot of farming historically, with the PFAS that ended up in the municipal waste that was approved to be used on the farmland here in my town and in Fairfield and most of the farms in Maine. So we've transitioned from drinking straight out of our well, which we've done for years, and running that through a Brita filter first. I heard from my husband that the University of Maine is about to start doing some tests on activated charcoal to see how well it removes PFAS. So fingers crossed, because I'm pretty sure that our Brita filters mostly use activated charcoal to filter out waste. So I'm hoping that produces positive results, but we'll find out soon enough. This big bag here is our cured hardneck garlic. Because this house wasn't originally designed with full-blown homesteading in mind, space has always been an issue when it comes to curing and storing our food, which was part of the reason that we transitioned the old red room, the junk room, into a pantry space. Is we just really needed it. We didn't have anywhere to keep a year's supply of food, which is our ultimate goal. I guess one thing that I should mention is that we are a 2-person household, sometimes 3. I do have a stepson that's just turned 18 years old, just finished high school and is starting college and is working. So he is not here all of the time, though we do try to keep some things on stock for when he's visiting. But for the most part, our objective is to make sure that we can feed 2 people for most of the year. I have an empty corner in the back here that I suspect will be filled with jars as I do more canning. But what I do have canned so far is a whole lot of sauerkraut. We love sauerkraut. I have fallen in love with fermented foods just because they're so good for your gut health, and I like that I can can foods without having to use a pressure canner. So what I've been doing is buying cabbages from the store, since our cabbages aren't ready yet, and we struggle so badly with cabbage moth here that even with the cabbage that we've grown this year that's covered, they just get really pest eaten. So we are planning at some point to build a more sheltered area to grow our cabbages, because we like cabbage and I would prefer to grow our own than have to buy what's at the store. Fortunately though, it's pretty cheap right now. So we've been buying cabbages, making sauerkraut with those mason jar fermentation kits that I mentioned, and I've been storing those here. So this is just cabbage, and then you'll notice that I have these other ones here that are, it looks like it's a mix of something. So these are mixed greens that come out of our garden. It could be wild spinach, kale, Swiss chard, arugula, basically whatever is available. I'm adding it to our sauerkraut and fermenting it together so that I can, you know, get the added nutrition from what's coming out of my garden without having to pull out the pressure canner and can the greens that way. This is just much easier for me, and like I said, I love sauerkraut, so I'm more than happy to eat this every week. Speaking of wild spinach, I do have some Chenopodium album here. I dehydrated a bunch so that we can add it to soups and stews as a thickening agent. You can do that with pretty much any green. We just had a lot of wild spinach in our garden, more than we can eat fresh in a week and more than I could add to my sauerkraut, so I just decided to dehydrate a little bit. So among the other foods that I've canned so far this year, I have the maple syrup that I mentioned earlier. So these are, it's not very much, but 2 jars of maple syrup, not bad for making your own sugar. I do have 1 jar that's in the fridge that we're using right now, but I like to have these in stock as well. Really, we're just trying to explore different sustainable ways of being more self-sufficient. And when I say sustainable, I also mean just sustainable for us as people. You will find as you are diving into homesteading that unless you have a big family or a big community that's helping you with your homesteading projects, there's going to be a limit to what you can actually do with your time. We're kind of looking at what stuff we want to do ourselves and what stuff we can say, okay, I'd rather just go to the store and buy this. Maple syrup is something that I think we will do each year because it's a fun activity and there's not really much else going on that early in spring. So it fills that hunger gap time with an activity that's productive, and quite frankly, I find it kind of fun. Other canned goods that we have here, some canned apple pie fillings and applesauce. These are from the apples that we picked at a local orchard last year, and we'll be doing that again this year. Last year I learned how to properly preserve apples to make them last for months. And when I say preserve apples, I'm not just talking about canning them, but actually preserving the whole apple and making that fruit last for almost half a year. If you're interested in learning how to do that, it's an incredibly simple process, and you can watch that here. Some stuff we buy in bulk, like our buckwheat. I have a nice big bag of brown rice that will refill one of my pantry jars downstairs. Another big jar. This one is a mix of sweet brown rice and wild rice. I don't really keep track of what type of rice we're eating. I just make sure to buy organic and whatever is in season at the time, though I do really enjoy wild rice. It has a very unique flavor. All right, other than that, this empty space here we will be eventually filling up with potatoes and gourds and onions, all of our self-preserving foods that you can preserve whole. And so right now I do have a little bit of my early potatoes. We had a couple volunteer red potatoes that have been nice, and a couple early, I believe these are Yukon Gold potatoes. And then in here, we grew a lot of shallots this year, and they just did not do very well. So we got some shallots, not nearly as many as we planted. A lot of them rotted. But we'll be trying that again next year. We also very much enjoy shallots. In front of me here, I have a rack of onions that are curing. My setup is basically 2 stools and a window screen. So you don't have to make it complicated. This is the best I could do with the space that I have, and right now it's been too rainy and too humid to try to cure our onions outside. So I really wanted to make sure that these were preserved well. I've tried growing onions 3 years in a row. This is the first year that I've managed to get a decent sized crop. Previous years they've either been undersized or they've just rotted in the ground. I'm definitely learning each year better ways to grow onions. And you know, that's kind of what's great about this journey. Right now, we have the opportunity to make mistakes. I worry about the future, especially when it comes to food insecurity. I think a lot of folks think that they could just stop everything that they're doing and start gardening from scratch for the first time and have success. But there are so many challenges and trials and tribulations and good years and bad years for certain crops that to think that you could just start tomorrow and have a year's worth of food, everything that you'll need by the end of the season, is just insane to me. I encourage you to start as soon as possible if this is something that you're interested in. The sooner that you start, the more opportunities you'll have to learn how to do things properly for your area and really just increase your chances of success. There's going to be years where you do everything right and you're still not going to get a great crop just because of things that are out of your control, like all of the crazy weather that we've been dealing with this year. In Maine, it's been an incredibly wet summer, and that has come with its own unique set of challenges compared to last year when we had a severe drought. And so I've got to learn what thrives in wet weather and what does well in droughts. And my plan is to grow as much of both so that if one crop fails because of the weather, maybe I'll have another crop that I have an abundance of. Thank you for watching the first half of our Pantry Apothecary tour. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit that bell icon so you're notified anytime I release a new video. The Apothecary tour will be out later this week.